Much for being with us today. We have the host of Red Eye on Fox News, Tom Shillue, with us. He also sings, the bass with Jimmy's quartet, Fallon's quartet, the Ragtime Gals on Fallon tonight. Tom, thank you so much and happy Valentine's Day.
So I would say to these Galentine gals, if they're going to go out there and have a good time with their gals, don't forget there's guys out there too, stay open.
Okay. All right. Remember that this Valentine's Day, ladies and gentlemen who are watching. And I got to say, the gents got to, have the cojones to go up to the group of chicks and ask for a number or buy them a drink. I think that sometimes that doesn't happen as much as it should. But anyway, moving on.
Their skills have atrophied, these guys. And the reason is they spend all the time on the apps. They're swiping left and right. They don't have to say anything anymore. All they got to do is swipe. They got to turn off the phone and go up and get a phone number on paper.
Yeah. Like the old fashioned. I think it would impress women more than they think it will. But anyway, we can move along back to a more serious topic. How do you think that someone trains themselves not to compare their lives to other people's? Because it just seems so unnatural.
Well, it's just a matter of focus, because you've got to, there's a thing in the video when I say that you've got to. Everyone's a package deal. Mm-hmm. So when you're looking at, for instance, I talked a lot about career. If you're comparing yourself to someone else in your business, someone who's in higher management than you, or has the job that you want, or in show business, somebody who's getting more accolades than you, then you're not really comparing yourself to them. You're comparing that one little chunk of you. And that's no good. You got to take the package deal. Yeah. So the exercise is, anytime you are comparing someone, always use the package deal system. So like I made a reference to Louis C.K. or George Carlin and things like that. I used to sit and I would be amazed at watching them work. But if I were to only compare myself to them as a stand-up, then I would be sad, because they their careers were going so well, and they're also so artistically brilliant. I'd be envious of their talent. Mm-hmm. But if you use the package deal system, you think, but would I trade places with them? No, I wouldn't.
And you mentioned in your video, because of the full life package that you have, which with your lovely wife and your children and your Fox News show now. I mean, it's a complete thing. And I think to sometimes be ungrateful in one part of our life, we forget about all the other aspects of our life in which we have so many blessings and can be so grateful. And then that negativity kind of overshadows all the positive aspects. But in the video, you also talk about how you did stand up. You kind of mentioned it earlier in this Facebook Live, with no pay and no laughs for like a decade. So what the heck kept you going?
I did throw a bit of shade on myself in that video. When I looked back at it, I thought to myself, hey, Tom, go easy on yourself. I mean, it wasn't no laughs for 10 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was no laughs the first year. Then you get a couple of laughs, and then by the end of the 10 years, I was getting good laughs. But you have to be able to be happy with what's there. Comedians, one of their big problems is, and this is top headliners, there was a video that went around of George Lopez the other day, and he was getting in a fight with someone in the audience. And I ended up siding with George Lopez because I'm a comedian, and I think I always side with the comedian, basically. But he, like a lot of big headliners, he had the problem of, he was focusing on the one woman in the front row who didn't like his joke, when there was 10,000 people in his huge theater that were enjoying his act. A lot of comedians, they can't get past that front row. They'll be doing their set, and they see that person. They keep looking down at that one in the front row, that grumpy person who's not enjoying themselves, and it ruins the show for them. And they come off stage, and I'm the other comedian there, and they come up and they say, "Can you believe that person in the front row? I was, I wanted to tell them to get out, but I had no call. They weren't heckling me. They were just sitting there frowning for my whole set. It bothered them. Don't focus on that person. You have to focus on the whole audience, and that's what people so often do, is that they focus on the one thing that they're not getting instead of the 99 things that they're getting.
And I think even for the people that aren't in the performance arts, or aren't actors or performers or comedians like yourself, I think that we can all think of that one person in our life that kind of spews that negativity at us. Sometimes it could be a friend or a sibling or a parent, whoever is watching, and just kind of maybe have that same perspective of, don't worry about that heckler, don't worry about that negative person in the front row of your life. Like, worry about all of the other people that you might be impacting. I think that's a great message.
Yeah, negative person, they drag you down.
Mm-hmm.
They
Totally.
can drag you down with their negativity, and it's only because in reality they're not any more negative than you. It's just that they're focusing on the one negative thing, and a lot of people they dismiss the positive thinking people. They say, "Oh, you can't just think positive. It doesn't get you out of anything. It's not a realistic way to look at the world." No, you want to be realistic. You want to see that there are negative things. There's areas you need to work on. There's things you want to achieve. They're there. But if you focus on them all the time, you'll be unhappy. And then being unhappy makes you, it makes you not do things.
Mm-hmm.
It slows you down.
Totally. I love that analogy. I'm going to start using that in my life a little bit. So I'm a big fan of the Ragtime Dolls. And how did you get involved in that? Of course, it's on Jimmy Fallon's show. Did you have any prior musical training? Because, I mean, you come out there with, like, the harmonica and hit the tune just fine.
Well, I've been singing barbershop since high school.
Really?
Yeah. And, the Ragtime Gals was it was a long time coming, but I started singing barbershop in 1983 with my buddies in the bathroom at Norwood High School. And then, I always loved it. And I still sing with the same group, the same guys that I went to high school with.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, and then when I started doing stand-up, I loved barbershop. I still loved it as a hobby. So it's kind of one of these things where, this is where your passion comes in. I didn't follow my passion as a career with, I didn't say I'm going to have to, I love barbershop more than anything else, so I'm going to have to make my living singing barbershop. Mm-hmm. But I just did it for fun. So I started doing stand-up, and then after my shows where nobody was laughing, I would pull the other comedians aside, and we would sing out in the back alley behind the comic strip and these places like that.
That'd be funny.
I became known as this guy who loved to sing barbershop with people. Uh-huh. One of the guys I sang with was A.D. Miles, who is a comedian who later became the head writer for Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, and he's now the head writer for The Tonight Show. My friendship with A.D. Miles led to hanging out a little bit with Jimmy. We started singing. I started teaching tags, and then because it was such a great hobby of mine, it ended up rubbing off on the people around me, and that's how the Ragtime Gals all got started.
I love it, and I would say to AD, please do more of it, because I was watching him over the weekend, and I was showing him to my husband, my mother-in-law who was in town. Obviously tons of friends, like, have always posted them when they happen, and it is just such a clever idea, especially when you take famous hits like Roxanne or Sexual Healing and put it to that barbershop quartet. I just have this imagery of, like, the Music Man in my head, and it's so funny when you guys do it, and it just shows that comedy can be clean and, like, pure and appealing for people across all ages.
It is a great way to get a PG version of what is let's admit it, some of the songs we do are pretty risque.
For sure.
But we do them in a kind of a family-friendly way.
Yeah, it's tons of fun. So moving on to politics now, how do you define your politics? Because I'm sure that there's people that assume that, oh, you must be conservative, you must be a right-winger because you have a show on Fox, and in order to get a show on Fox, you must all be the same. But obviously we're aware that Fox News isn't a monolith. So could you tell our audience a little bit about how you define your personal politics?
I'm conservative, pretty traditional, and it's because of the way I grew up. I grew up in a conservative family in a small town, and so I have the kind of, what I think more than anything, more than liberal or conservative, I'm old-fashioned. That's kind of my politics. But you're right. Fox News is not a monolith. You go through that place. There's people. The discussions that people have on the elevators and in the shows, and people like Dennis who get booked on the shows, they go over there and they realize that there's just as much there's more diversity of thought at Fox News. Did you go off?
I'm still here.
Oh, my screen went black. I think it was my power saver, but
we still got you. Don't worry.
There's more diversity of thoughts in that building than in any other media I've ever been in. Because I'm in show business, so I would be, doing. I've done things on all the networks and the cable networks, Comedy Central, and things like that.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of diversity of political thought at those networks. There is at Fox News. So yes, I've never been in a place that has more diversity.
And definitely more diversity than America's liberal campuses, that's for sure. Where I know a lot of our audience has been watching your video and sharing it, so I love that aspect of it. Do you still perform stand-up? I mean, can people go out and still see you, at a club this weekend?
Yes. Oh, well, not this weekend because what I did was after I got the show, I continued doing dates. In fact, when I first got Red Eye, I was still going out on the road and doing shows with Jim Gaffigan, but then it started to impede on my quality of life because I never saw my family. Sometimes I would take them with me on the road, but I was doing the show and then I would go off on the weekends and do stand-up. So what I did was I decided to do headline once a month. So I would go out and do a club in New Hampshire or Boston or San Francisco, and once a week, one weekend a month, get out there and headline because I love keeping my foot in the stand-up. Then I got a deal to write this book, so I have a book coming out. We haven't even announced it yet, but we're going to announce it very soon.
Here we go, PragerU exclusive, Tom Shillue's book. Tell us about it.
It's a book about growing up in my hometown in Norwood, Massachusetts. It's a lot of fun stories, and it's basically a book about growing up and the values that I got from my family and my town and things like that. So it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of funny stories in it, and stories from my stand-up and things like that. So I've been working on this book for the past 6 months. So we're gonna announce it soon. I don't think HarperCollins is going to be upset that I'm spilling the beans because we're going to do the official announcement soon on Red Eye, and then it's going to be book.
Yeah, well, you should definitely, I feel like it'd be super fun if instead of like just book signings and a book tour, you did a little bit of stand-up at all your stops. I mean, just
Absolutely.
hint, HarperCollins. But since you still do stand-up and you're still in that kind of comedy world, was there a coming out of the closet kind of moment for you as a comedian who's a conservative in that industry?
It's so funny because I didn't do politics in my act because I don't like it as stand-up. I like the personal stuff. So I would get up on stage and tell personal stories, and I could do them in the East Village. So I had a lot of fans from what I called like the NPR crowd. The Northeast liberal set. They because my act was universal as stand-up should be, I think. But sometimes a little bit of my politics would come through. I remember when I was opening up for Jim. Jim has a very diverse audience. Jim Gaffigan, he's got a huge following all over the country, and he doesn't like to get political at all. And he doesn't. He comes out, he talks about food, he talks about his favorite subjects, food and laziness and things like that.
Pickup trucks on his Netflix special, which cracked me up.
Oh yeah, and so he has a lot of fans from the red states and the blue states.
Yeah. And
the reason he liked my act is that I didn't do politics. I come out and I talk about myself and my family and things like that. Every once in a while, I had a story about my daughter on the playground, and she was going bang bang bang, bang bang with a little kid. They were playing bang bang bang, and the daughter, the father of the boy came running over and he said, "No guns, no guns. You know I
gosh.
the guns." And then my daughter held up her hand and she said, "It's not real." And I told her on stage, got a big laugh in the theater, and then people were, it was a big laugh from what you might call the Second Amendment crowd. Okay,
of course.
Then I got
my people.
Said, hey, what? Be easy on the politics. And I was like, I didn't say anything about politics. He says, So he knew that we happened to be out. I forget where we were. I think we were out in the great Northwest, but it was clearly a conservative audience. But Jim, for the people in the audience that didn't feel that way, Jim doesn't like to get he doesn't like to stir up politics, which I agree with him on that. But it was interesting that I didn't say anything about politics, but the audience seems to know where I was coming from.
Yeah, because they could relate to it, and I think so much of comedy is like relatable, and that's why your personal stories are so great. So in all of that time touring with Jim, do you feel like because politics wasn't a part of either of your acts that it was kind of this safe space for you?
It was, and it should be. The comedians I loved growing up. I mean, to me, because guys like George Carlin, he did political material, but I never saw it because that wasn't the stuff that they played on TV. When he did a TV set, he usually had to keep it, fairly middle of the road, that kind of stuff. So that's the stuff I grew up on, and I loved guys like Bob Newhart. You know, I loved stuff that was just universal, and especially personal stuff when people would tell stories about themselves. That's all the stuff that I always loved. And of course, I grew up on Carol Burnett, who's my favorite show.
Oh man.
Tim Conway, and I mean, I just love that stuff. And it was great to watch those shows. We would watch it. The whole family would watch that show together, and it was a very, this wasn't a kids show. It was a show that was sketch comedy for adults. But as a little kid, I remember just enjoying and rolling over in laughter. I didn't get some of the jokes went over my head, but it was fun for the whole family, and that's the kind of comedy I grew up on. So then when I started in the stand-up world, get out there in the clubs, and I mean, these places were, it was a lot of ne'er-do-wells. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
A lot of drunks, a lot of hard-edged
I have a girlfriend who used to date comedians. Let's just say she doesn't anymore.
Yeah. It's a lifestyle. I mean, it's a motley crew.
Yeah.
And then, because the comedians, they spend their time on the road, and they tend to get, they live a certain lifestyle. Then you get the people who come to the clubs, and they're just drinking. The whole thing became like, it's not the greatest place to start. The clubs are not a great place to mine a clean comedy act, but you're going to have to push through it. And then when you do find a little bit of success, then you can, then the audience can come to you.
Well, we love your story, and we love that you've done this PragerU video with us. Thank you so much for your time today, and congrats on all of your success, because comparing myself to you, you're pretty dang successful. So thanks for joining us, Tom. And everyone, remember to go take a note from Tom's new video at PragerU.com today, and it's don't compare yourself to others. Thanks so much for watching this PragerU Live, and we'll see you next